Hello, my name is Dr. Tom Batt, and I'm from Kean University in the Battleship New Jersey Oral History Project. Today I'm aboard the Battleship New Jersey, located in Camden, New Jersey, for a reunion of ship members. Today is September 30th, the year 2005, 1200 hours, and I'm interviewing Mr. Kenneth Hobbs of Monterey, Tennessee, who served aboard the Battleship New Jersey from January 1951 to October 1952. He served as a Radar Man 3 aboard the ship. Mr. Hobbs, thank you for talking with us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Let's start off the conversation. How did you come to be involved with the Battleship New Jersey?
I was a member of the reserves in Indianapolis, Indiana. They activated our entire unit in January of 1951. We were all sent to Great Lakes, and then from Great Lakes we were assigned to various ships. Most of our entire reserve unit went to either the New Jersey, the aircraft carrier Bonami Richard, or the communication ship, the Estes. I was fortunate enough to be assigned to the USS New Jersey, and my first duty station on the New Jersey was the number 3rd Division, number 3 16-inch guns.
How did you, what were you doing in Tennessee before you came aboard the ship?
I didn't live in Tennessee at that time. We only moved to Tennessee in '98, the end of '98. Between the time I joined the reserves in 1947, was activated in 1951, discharged in 1952, and then I headed south to the University of Miami, where I got my my undergraduate degree in accounting, and from that time on I worked in Miami. Met my wife there, who is a native Miamian, and we've been married now since 1957.
And so before you came aboard the ship, what were you doing? Were you?
I was working in a department store. I was a cashier. Well, I wasn't a cashier. I was in the cashier's office, responsible for balancing all of the tellers as they turned their money in and things like that.
Now, once you come aboard the ship, what did you recall your early reaction when you first saw the battleship?
I thought it was huge. I had never been on anything quite that big. My reserve cruises that I'd been on, they were on destroyers and out of New Orleans. And most of the time it was such a small ship, maybe, I don't know, 350 to 500 feet long. I was seasick just about the entire time. We're going someplace. For some unknown reason, as soon as we headed back, I was never seasick. But each time that we went on one of those cruises, I ended up in a radar division, operating a radar gear and learning how to do it. Of course, when I got on the New Jersey, well, they put me in the gunnery division, and that was that for a while until I found out that maybe they could use some radarmen. So I asked permission to speak to the radar division officer, and he promptly wanted me and decided to send me off to radar school in Norfolk, Virginia. I was in there from April until came back on board ship in August of 1951 when the ship was in Yokosuka, Japan.
So before you went to radarman school, you were not formally trained in radarman work. You were just doing it incidentally, on-the-job training, so to speak.
That's correct, yes.
How well were you trained based on on-the-job training?
Well, I could very well describe to the division officer the operation of the SG radar and the SK radar, and how to operate the DRT, the Dead Reckoning Tracer. And when he found out about that, he said, "You're going to radar school."
Talk to me a little bit about your work aboard the ship as a radarman, and while I assume you're off the coast of Korea.
Right. When we were off the coast of Korea, if we were in general quarters, my some general quarters station was on the bridge with the captain operating the SG radar receiver that was on the bridge, and I was relaying information from CIC, Combat Information Center, to the captain or the officer of the deck.
Do you recall any specific information relayed, any tenuous times?
It wasn't quite a tenuous times, but it was something that I'll remember. We had gone over to the west side of Korea, and when we were on the west side of Korea, we were under the command of the British fleet over there, because the admiral on the British fleet was a higher rank than the admiral that we had on board our ship. So we took instructions from the British fleet. In our jargon of telling ships to turn, we will tell them Corpa 90, for example, and then we'll say, ready, execute. And at execute, we make the maneuver that we're supposed to make. While we're over there with the British, they would give us the same Corpa 90, but then the next thing we would hear, ready, go. And that sort of shook us all up. That was a fun time, but one of the things that I remember the most is that one mid-watch from midnight until 4 a.m. in the morning, we were doing some shelling of the North Koreans.
And at that point, we'll stop for a second.
Okay.
We're battery operated. Have to change the battery.
Okay.
That happens.
Okay.
We're starting to tape up once again with Mr. Hobbs where he left off, as we had to do a quick battery change. Mr. Hobbs.
Okay. We one mid-watch, which would be from midnight to 4 a.m. in the morning. We were talking with a Marine unit in Korea, and I was on the telephones getting the spots. So they were spotting for us as we were firing the 16-inch guns. And I spent 4 hours talking to this one person the entire time. Of course, I had no idea who I was talking to. It was just one of those situations where you're talking to somebody and all you know is a voice and he knows your voice, and then we're going back and forth. When we got back from Korea, I went to back to where I used to work in a department store in Indianapolis. And I, you know, trying to show off, I wore my dress uniform and I had my Korean ribbon and so forth on. And I go up to the office where I used to work, and there was somebody up there that I knew that was in the Marines, had been in the Marine Reserves, and he'd been called to active duty before I was. He saw me walking up there and came over and talked to me, and he said, "Didn't know you were in the service. I didn't know you were in the Navy." He said, "What ship were you on?" I said, "New Jersey." And he said, "Onrush." I said, "What?" He said, "Onrush." He said he spent 4 hours one night talking to somebody on the New Jersey, it was Onrush, giving them spots. And I said, "That was me that you were talking to, those 4 hours." And we didn't know each other were in that area whatsoever. So those kind of experiences that I really remember and I relish.
Any other experiences, anecdotal experiences that you think are important for people to know about?
Oh, I remember we went to Sasebo, Japan, the Liberty time that we had, going to Tokyo and Kamakura and Yokohama, in that area. It was just a chance to get to see the culture of the Japanese people, and it was interesting there. But I think the rest of the time was coming through the Panama Canal when we were coming back from over there. That was something I happened to be able to go up to the 011 level. And it was up on the 011 level that I was taking some movies, which of course Heat took care of the movie, the film and everything. But it was just so interesting coming through there. Then of course the following summer we took the NROTC cadets from the colleges to Cherbourg, France, Paris, France, Lisbon, Portugal, and back to Guantanamo Bay. On the way back from Guantanamo, we had to sort of race a hurricane that was coming up the coast. And so after we got rid of the cadets, then we were able to head east to get away from the hurricane. But all in all, I have to say that my experiences in the Navy during that period of time was one of the best times of my life. And if I had not already made up my mind that I wanted to go to college, and I probably would have stayed in the Navy. I had a chance to have almost 2,000 different billets in the Atlantic Fleet. I wouldn't have changed from the New Jersey if I decided to ship over.
You sound very positive about the ship. While you were serving off the coast of Korea, what was the morale like aboard ship?
Most of the time, the morale was very high as far as I could tell. At least in our division, we had very few problems in our division. We enjoyed it immensely. I can't think of any bad problems that we had. One incident that sort of strikes me as funny, wasn't funny at the time. I was not on board ship when we lost Robert Osterwind. That was just before I got back on board ship from radar school, but there was another occasion shortly after when we were off the coast of Korea, and there was a little patrol boat of South Korea, which coincidentally had the same number as we did, 62. And it was being shelled by the North Korean shore batteries. So they let us know that they needed help, and we raced up there to where they were, and we started firing our 5-inch guns at the shore batteries. The next day, when our ship newspaper came out, they had a little cartoon there, and since both of us were 62, the cartoon was sort of the USS New Jersey standing up here like this, with the 62 showing big, and arms coming around holding the little PC-62 in its arms, like a big brother protecting a little baby brother or something like that. That was in the ship's newspaper, and that was just so cute and so apropos for the situation that it was great.
Talk to me a little bit about the captain aboard the ship. What was his name, and what was the attitude of the crew towards the captain?
When we first went on board ship, the captain was David Tyree. I don't think that he was a little bit more strict, although I had no problem because I was still working on the bridge most of the time with him. I didn't have that much to do with him in particular. During the change of command, we had Captain McCorkle came on board, and Captain McCorkle had his dog with him. Well, unfortunately, when we fired the 16-inch guns, most of the time the SG repeater radar on the bridge went out. So I had nothing to do except stand there and listen to the radio telephones and relay information. But the Captain McCorkle's dog was scared to death. Guess who ended up holding the dog? Me. I held the dog all during the firing, and he was very appreciative of it, but McCorkle was very nice to work with. I had no problem with either one of them, but McCorkle was a little bit easier for me in particular to work with.
Just going back to when you helped that Marine officer who you later worked with, what situation was he in? Did he ever describe it to you?
No, he never did describe it. He only told me, that they were observing our fire, and they knew that we were very accurate. We found out from lots of sources that the New Jersey 16-inch guns were so much better than other ships in the area. We found out that we fired, I think it was 2,700 rounds of 16-inch ammunition, and we only used about 700 rounds to get on target. The other ships, one other ship that we know of, they said they fired 2,400 rounds and they took 1,700 rounds to get on target. So they only got about 700 on the target, where we got about close to 2,000 on the targets each time.
Why would it take time to get on target with your rounds?
You're given a spot, a range and bearing to the target that you are actually aiming to fire at. And all of this information, your position, and everything that goes into setting up a plot for firing the 16-inch guns goes into fire control. And from there, fire control makes the adjustments and aims the guns. And then they fire the guns through that method. We just had some good fire controlmen that knew exactly how to set it up. We were getting good spots all the time from the observers. Some were from our helicopter. Others were from ROC, the Republic of Korea Army, and then we had the Marines there. And a lot of times we had several of our own men. In fact, our first-class radarman, one of them had been flown over there, and he was acting as a spotter for us on one of our missions.
We'll wait till they finish the announcement over the ones that. What was the men's attitude, especially recalled towards the Korean Army and the Koreans in general? Did you feel you were supporting them? You're just fighting for the United States? You're just doing your job? Do you recall what the attitude was?
Well, we knew that we had our own Army personnel over there and our Marines over there. So the attitude was that we're helping them. And it was a big help that we were giving. I'll give you another little example. Where I live, I have run across a bunch of Vietnam Army veterans. And all of them always tell me that they said they were never so happy as they were when they found out that the New Jersey was off the coast and was going to give them firing support. Now that, to me, is an honor to the USS New Jersey.
One area I investigate also is that the changing face of the Navy. When I see Navy cruise books from World War II, Battleship New Jersey, faces are almost all white. By the 1980s, really mixed group. Harry Truman integrated the military by Executive Order 1948. Talk to me a little bit about the integration of the crew during your time aboard the ship in the Korean War. What were the relations between the men? What do you recall about that in general, if anything?
I know that most of the deck divisions, 1 through 7, did have the blacks in those divisions. But we had a first-class petty officer who was Southern as Southern can be, and he refused to allow any black in the K Division.
K Division, sir, was your division?
That's correct. K Division was the radar division. He was very anti-black, and he went out of his way to tell everybody that he was. After I was discharged, I understand that there were several blacks that did come into that division despite him. He was still there for a while. I know for a fact that this particular first-class petty officer had been up to first class and down to third class and back up to first class and bouncing all around. Then I understand he ended up on a destroyer someplace, but after he was gone, why, I'm sure it was integrated. But like I said, the deck divisions, fire control divisions, they did have some blacks in there, and which would not bother me one bit if we had them in our division, because I was from Indianapolis. I was well acquainted with them, but actually in the high school that I went to, we didn't have any blacks in the high school where I went, because we had a black high school and blacks all went to that high school.
What was the general attitude of the crew towards the black servicemen?
I don't think there was any animosity against them. I think they just considered that they were Navy personnel and they were there to work the same as they were doing. And I don't think there was a bit of a problem there.
Now, are there any other experiences aboard ship that you had aboard ship or in radar school that you think were important for the historical record that you'd like to talk about?
Oh, we had a nice discussion when we were in radar school, because when I was sent off to radar school, we had no petty officers or anything in that group. And I happened to be from the fleet, they called it. So I ended up being the company commander of one of the companies in radar school. So when we had the duty, my place was over in the office with the bosun mate, the chiefs, the first class petty officers and everything. And we always had big discussions of what it would take to sink the New Jersey. And nobody could ever come up with anything other than they say, well, we figure maybe 6 torpedoes in the same identical spot might do some damage. But that was basically, of course, I had a girlfriend in Norfolk, so that made it much nicer. Unfortunately, she is not my wife. When I left Norfolk, well, I left her behind. Actually, she left me behind. She married an Italian sailor while I was in Korea, so that But I had no animosity
I'm sure
towards
you're
her.
much happier today with your wife.
I am. We've
This
been
is on-
married for 48 years,
And
so.
this is on tape, she'll hear that. I don't want to get you in trouble. Two final questions. When you got back from the Korean War, what was the reaction of the American public to you serving in the Navy during the Korean War, do you recall?
They were just happy to see me back. I don't think, it wasn't like the Vietnam War. Vietnam War, the people were against them, it just seemed like. The Korean War veterans, of course, the Korean War is generally considered to be the forgotten war. That people just forget about it. But I don't think that the people were actually upset or anything like they were with the Vietnam War. Vietnam War, they just felt we shouldn't have been there to begin with. Korean War, it was a police action, it wasn't a war. But it did create problems.
Final question. How did your service aboard the ship impact your life?
Oh, it gave me more of a discipline in my life, knowing that the way things were in the Navy, that you always had certain disciplines that you had to follow. You had orders that you followed, and you tried to follow those orders to the best of your ability. That's sort of been the thing that has been foremost in my life ever since. So.
Anything else that you'd like to add at this point?
No, this was my 8th reunion of the New Jersey. I didn't know anything about these reunions until I joined the American Legion and got the American Legion magazine. And once I got that, first time I saw in there a reunion USS New Jersey, and I called right away to find out. Unfortunately, the first one that I could have gone to was at Cherry Hills. But at the time that that reunion was going on, I was with my sister-in-law and her husband and my wife going to his ship reunion, which was in Portland, Oregon, which all the way across the country. Of course, then the next year it was in San Diego. I wasn't going to go all the way back there. Then the next year after that was in Norfolk, Virginia. And that's when I had my first experience of coming back. Then my wife and I were fortunate enough that we were in Seattle for the reunion in Seattle and followed the ship part way down through Puget Sound as she was being towed out. And then we kept following the information that was coming across on the computer, email, and website. Kept following that all the way around until she got all the way into Philadelphia. Very interesting and very well worthwhile.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Today I've been interviewing Mr. Kenneth Hobbs, who served aboard the Battleship New Jersey as a Radar Man 3 from January 1951 to October 1952. And he's back aboard the ship today, September 30th, the year 2005, for a ship's reunion. My name is Dr. Tom Banner from Kean University and the Battleship New Jersey Oral History Project. Thank you very much. It was a great interview.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.